Husband refuses to donate liver to sick wife and then disappears. But years later they meet and she prepares a surprise for him. Sarah returned from the doctor, weeping. Her hands trembled, and the sound of her short, ragged breaths filled the car as she drove home. The news she'd received still echoed in her mind, every word the doctor spoke etched there like a sentence. She had a severe liver disease and needed a transplant to survive. Without it, the disease's progression would be rapid, and time was not on her side. As soon as she entered the house, Mark, her husband, was sitting on the couch watching television. He immediately noticed Sarah's distressed state and rose, concerned. "What happened, love?" he asked, approaching her with a serious expression. Sarah felt the weight of the situation and began to cry even harder. She could barely speak, but between sobs, she managed to explain the gravity of it. "The doctor said that I need a liver transplant, Mark, and there's no prospect of finding a donor soon." Mark hugged Sarah and stroked her hair, trying to calm her. "It's going to be okay, Sarah. I'm here with you. We'll face this together, no matter what happens." Despite the comfort, uncertainty hung over them. Sarah joined the transplant waiting list, but the chances of finding a compatible donor were low. The doctor suggested that close family members undergo compatibility tests. Unfortunately, none of them were a match, and Sarah's hope began to wane. "What now, doctor?" Sarah asked at her next appointment, her voice filled with despair. "Other people can also get tested, Sarah, close friends for example. Sometimes we find a compatible donor outside the immediate family circle," the doctor replied in a calm and encouraging voice. Sarah decided to follow the doctor's advice and asked her closest friends, as well as Mark, to get tested. The wait for the results was agonizing, but finally, one day, the phone rang. It was the doctor. "I have good news, Sarah," he said. "Your husband, Mark, is a match. He could be the donor you need." Sarah felt a wave of relief and happiness. She ran to share the news with him, gripping his hands tightly. "It seems even in this, we're soulmates," she said. Mark smiled, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. He mumbled something inaudible and looked away. Sarah felt a pang of worry in her stomach. In the days that followed, Sarah noticed Mark was more distant. He made excuses to avoid doctor's appointments and seemed increasingly evasive when the topic of the transplant came up. She tried not to dwell on it, believing it was just nervousness about the whole situation. However, one day, arriving home earlier than expected, Sarah heard Mark talking on the phone. She stopped in the hallway, not wanting to listen but unable to walk away when she heard her name mentioned. "I don't know if I love Sarah enough for this." Mark's voice sounded tired, almost as if he was carrying a burden. "I mean, I care about her, but donating a part of myself, I don't know if I'm ready for that. And I'm thinking about asking for a divorce. I don't love her anymore." Sarah felt her heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. She recoiled, almost tripping over her own feet. Tears welled in her eyes and streamed silently down her face. She felt a mix of anger and disbelief. The man who had promised to be by her side through everything now wanted to abandon her when she needed him most. Without a word, she went to the bedroom and closed the door. She sat on the bed, still in shock from what she had heard. Mark's words echoed in her mind like a nightmare. How could he do this? How could he be so cold and calculating? She cried until she had no more tears, her thoughts a whirlwind of emotions: anger, sadness, despair. She knew she needed to confront Mark about what she'd heard, but for now, she couldn't even look at him. She lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling, trying to calm her thoughts. She took several deep breaths, as if trying to prepare for the battle to come. Tomorrow, she thought. Tomorrow I'll talk to him. I need to know what's really going on. The night was long and full of disturbing dreams. Sarah barely slept, but when the morning light finally streamed into the room, she got up, resolute. She went downstairs and found Mark in the kitchen, idly stirring his coffee. "We need to talk," she said, her voice firm but with a trace of sadness. Mark looked at her, his face pale and tired. "About what?" he asked, trying to sound uninterested. Sarah stared at him for a moment before replying, feeling the anger and pain bubbling inside her. About what I heard yesterday. About you not loving me enough to donate a part of yourself, and about wanting a divorce. Mark fell silent, the weight of his own words now hanging in the air between them. He knew he couldn't escape the truth, and he knew this conversation would change everything forever. I don't want to talk about this, Sarah, Mark exclaimed, his face red with frustration. Sarah looked at him, her eyes still wet with tears, trying to understand what was happening. It was as if the man she knew had transformed into a stranger. What do you mean you don't want to talk about this, Mark? She asked, her voice choked. This is about my life, about our future. I need you now more than ever. Mark shook his head impatiently. I've already said what I think. I don't want to have this surgery. I won't risk my life, even if you think the risk is minimal. I don't want to go through with it. But you're healthy, Sarah insisted, trying to remain calm. The doctor said the risk is very small. You know, the liver is an organ that regenerates in a few weeks. You'd be fine again. I don't want to risk it. Mark cut her off, his voice getting louder. I'm not undergoing surgery, period. And that's not all. I'm not willing to give a part of myself for something like this. I don't want to risk my life for you. Sarah felt as if the ground were opening beneath her feet. His words were like daggers in her heart. You. She began, her voice trembling. You always said you'd give your life for me, that you'd do anything to protect me. Was it all a lie, Mark? Mark looked away, his lips pressing into a thin line. Things change, Sarah. I didn't know something like this would happen. I didn't imagine I'd have to make a decision like this. Sarah began to cry again, feeling completely betrayed. Mark turned, grabbed his bag, and started walking toward the door. I need to go to work, he said, his voice cold and distant. We'll talk about this later. Mark, please. Sarah pleaded, but he was already rushing out the door, hurried and angry. Sarah stood there alone, feeling the weight of reality crushing her. Her sobs echoed through the empty house. She knew she couldn't stay there, not at that moment. She needed someone to talk to, someone who could offer some comfort. She grabbed her keys and left the house, driving to her friend Emily's house. Upon arriving, she couldn't contain her tears. Concerned about her friend's state, Emily asked, "What happened, Sarah?" pulling her inside. Sarah sat on the couch and broke down. She told Emily everything, from the diagnosis to the discovery that Mark was a match, to his refusal to donate, and the argument from moments earlier. Emily listened intently, shaking her head. "Sarah, I understand it's a difficult situation for him, but the excuse he gave doesn't make sense," Emily said finally, her voice firm. "He's healthy, and you yourself said the doctor explained the risk is minimal." Sarah nodded, wiping away her tears. "Yes, that's what hurts me so much. He doesn't even consider it. He just refuses." Emily sighed, placing a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "The liver is an organ that regenerates quickly. He would be fine again. And more importantly, he'd be saving your life. If he really loved you, Sarah, this shouldn't even be a question. He should be by your side, willing to do anything." Sarah felt a pang in her heart upon hearing those words. She knew Emily was right. Mark's excuse seemed increasingly hollow and selfish. Maybe he doesn't love me enough," Sarah murmured, looking at the floor. Emily remained silent for a moment before replying. "I didn't want to say this, but you've already realized it yourself. If he truly loved you, he wouldn't act this way." Sarah sighed deeply, feeling a profound sadness wash over her. She thanked Emily for her support and decided to go home. She needed to think, she needed to understand what she would do next. At home, the door was ajar. Puzzled, Sarah entered slowly, feeling a chill run down her spine. Her heart quickened when she saw that Mark's suitcase was no longer in the corner of the living room where he always left it. Sarah's eyes darted to the bedroom, and when she entered, shock overwhelmed her. The drawers were open, and Mark's clothes were gone. With bated breath, Sarah ran to the office where they kept documents and some valuables. The safe was open, and she noticed that the money she had saved over the years had disappeared. Sarah felt the ground give way again. "No," she whispered, her voice broken by disbelief. "It can't be." She rushed to the computer, opened her banking app, and saw the confirmation of her worst fear. The balance was zero. Mark had transferred all the money from their joint account. "How could he do this to me?" she murmured to herself, tears streaming down her face again. Sarah sat down, feeling crushed by the weight of the betrayal. Everything made sense now. The words on the phone, the sudden coldness, the distance. Mark had not only refused to help her, but had also robbed her and left her with nothing. She buried her face in her hands and cried, her sobs filling the empty house. She felt completely alone, abandoned by the person who had promised to be by her side forever. With a broken heart, Sarah realized she would have to face this battle alone. She slowly got up, wiped her tears, and looked around. She knew she had to be strong. She couldn't let Mark's betrayal destroy her. She took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. "I'll fight, with or without him," she told herself, feeling a new determination grow within her. Even in so much pain, she knew she couldn't give up. She wouldn't allow Mark or her disease to defeat her. She still had a life ahead of her, and she would do everything in her power to save it. Sarah spent months trying to contact Mark, but he seemed to have vanished from the face of the earth. She called his cell phone incessantly, sent messages, emails, but nothing. Each frustrated attempt was like a stab in her already wounded heart. Desperate, Sarah decided to go to the police. She explained what had happened, how he had stolen her money and disappeared without a trace. The police opened a report, but quickly made it clear that without concrete leads, it would be very difficult to locate him. "We'll try, Mrs. Sarah, but unfortunately, these cases don't always have a quick resolution," one of the officers said in a voice that tried to be comforting but only increased Sarah's feeling of helplessness. She felt she had few options. Months passed without any news. Sarah, consumed by a mixture of anger and sadness, imagined Mark somewhere distant, enjoying the money she had saved with so much sacrifice. The idea that he was well while she was fighting for her life infuriated her. Not even Mark's relatives knew his whereabouts. They were also shocked and couldn't accept what he had done. "He was never like this, Sarah. I really don't know what happened to him," Mark's sister said during a visit, her eyes full of tears. But apologies didn't solve anything. The lack of answers and the feeling of abandonment began to affect Sarah's mental health. She slowly deteriorated, sinking deeper and deeper into despair. The nights were endless, full of dark thoughts and disturbing dreams. Weeks passed, and her physical condition began to worsen drastically. First came the lack of appetite. Nothing seemed appealing, and she forced herself to eat just to maintain a little strength. Then, Sarah's skin began to turn yellowish, a sign that her liver was failing even more. Fatigue was constant. She spent her days in bed, too weak to get up. When she tried, her legs trembled so much that she could barely take a few steps before having to sit down again. "Sarah, you need to eat," her friend Emily insisted, bringing a bowl of warm soup. "You need to be strong." Sarah shook her head, refusing, tears streaming down her face. She was tired of fighting. If it weren't for the help of friends and family, Sarah didn't know what would have happened to her. They took turns caring for her, bringing food, helping with housework, and trying to keep her spirits up. However, nothing seemed to work. More time passed, and Sarah reached the point where she could no longer walk. She was too weak, her hope practically extinguished. The only thing keeping her alive was the anger she felt towards Mark. She wondered every day, what if he had done the transplant? I would be healthy now. Did he ever truly love me? During this dark period, she received several visits from friends and relatives. Everyone thought she was in her final days and came to say goodbye. "Sarah, I wish I could do more for you," a distant cousin said, his eyes watering. I just wanted you to know that we're all rooting for you. Sarah just smiled weakly, too weak to respond. The sadness in her visitor's eyes only reinforced her own hopelessness. She began to resign herself to the idea that her time was running out. Then, one particularly challenging day, when Sarah thought the end was truly near, she received news she never expected. The phone rang, and Emily answered with Sarah lying in bed beside her. Emily's expression quickly changed from concern to shock. "My God, Sarah," Emily murmured, covering her mouth with her hand. "It's the hospital. They found a donor for you." A ray of hope pierced the darkness surrounding her. Her heart began to beat faster. "What? How?" she managed to stammer, almost not believing what she had heard. "I don't know, but you have a chance," Emily exclaimed, tears of joy streaming down her face. "You have a chance, Sarah." The following hours were a blur of preparation. Friends and relatives rushed to help Sarah get ready to go to the hospital. The procedure was risky, especially given Sarah's weakened state, but it was her only chance to survive. The transplant was complicated and long. Sarah's body was weak, and the doctors had to fight to stabilize her during the surgery. But after hours of tension, the surgeon came out of the operating room, a tired smile on his face. "She's doing well," he said to Emily and the other friends anxiously waiting in the waiting room. It was a difficult procedure, but she held on. Now it's just a matter of recovery. In the days that followed, Sarah began to show remarkable signs of improvement. Color returned to her face, and she began to feel stronger. There was still a long way to go, but the light at the end of the tunnel finally seemed closer. Sitting in her hospital bed, with Emily by her side, Sarah looked out the window and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. "I'm so happy for you, Sarah," Emily said, holding her friend's hand. Sarah smiled, a genuine smile this time. "Me too, Emily. Me too. And I'm going to take this new chance. I'm going to live." She knew she still had a lot to process, a lot to face. But now, with a new life ahead of her, Sarah was determined to move forward, leaving the darkness behind and focusing only on the light that was finally beginning to shine in her path again. Sarah had managed to rebuild her life after the successful transplant. She slowly regained her health and happiness, but even in the happiest moments, there was always a lingering trace of sadness and anger when she thought of Mark. He had fled with her money and abandoned her when she needed him most. These memories resurfaced from time to time, and Sarah would become serious and thoughtful, lost in thoughts about the past. Determined to move forward, Sarah decided to set up a small diner in her garage. At first, it was a simple way to make a living, selling snacks to neighbors and people passing by on the street. The money she earned wasn't much, but it was enough to survive. She worked tirelessly, putting all her effort and dedication into the small business. Over time, the quality of Sarah's snacks began to attract attention. Word spread, and soon her diner gained popularity. Business increased to the point where she needed to rent a commercial space to accommodate the growing demand. It was a simple space, but suitable for the diner's needs. She hired 2 employees to help with the customer flow, and that's when David entered her life. David was a hard-working young man, willing to do everything within the diner. Officially, he was hired as a waiter, but his proactivity led him to get involved in all necessary tasks. He cleaned the floors, washed dishes, prepared snacks, and did his best to ensure the establishment ran smoothly. "David, you don't have to do all this," Sarah said one night as they were closing the diner together. "I'd like to pay you a better salary for how much you help, but unfortunately, I can't yet." David smiled, wiping his hands on his apron. "Don't worry about it, Sarah. I like to help because you're a great boss. It's good to work for someone who cares about their employees." Sarah gave a sincere smile. She knew how lucky she was to have someone like David working alongside her. Every night, as a thank you, she offered him a ride home. Over time, the two grew closer. The professional relationship transformed into a friendship, and from that friendship, something more was born. They started dating, and soon Sarah found herself in love again. David was everything Mark never was: attentive, dedicated, and always willing to support her, both in good times and bad. Years passed, and Sarah and David got married. They had 2 children, twins, a joy that brought a new light into Sarah's life. The small business that started in her garage had transformed into a thriving restaurant. The restaurant was one of the largest in the region and was always full of customers. The success was such that they opened a second location in another neighborhood, managed by David. Sarah could hardly believe how much her life had changed. From a humble woman who could barely survive on what little she earned, she had transformed into a wealthy and respected businesswoman. But even with all the success and happiness, there were moments when the past resurfaced. Thinking of Mark and what he had done still left a bitter taste. One day, while reviewing some restaurant accounts, Sarah found herself looking out the window, lost in her thoughts. She was thinking of Mark again, how he had simply disappeared, taking all the money she had saved with so much effort. David, who was in the office next door, entered and noticed the distant expression on Sarah's face. "Is everything okay, my love?" he asked, approaching. Sarah blinked, returning to the present, and smiled slightly at David. "Yes, just thinking." She hesitated, then decided to be honest. "Thinking about Mark and what he did." David nodded, understanding. He knew that despite all they had built together, there were scars that would never completely disappear. "I know it's hard to forget," he said, placing his hand on her shoulder. "But look where you are now. You built all of this with your own strength, without relying on anyone. Mark may have hurt you, but he couldn't destroy who you are." Sarah sighed and nodded. "You're right. It's just sometimes it's hard not to think about how things could have been different." David hugged her, offering comfort. "I know, and you have every right to feel that way. But the important thing is that you overcame it, found a new chance at happiness, and we have our family, our friends, and everything we've built together." Sarah smiled, feeling the warmth of David's embrace. He always knew what to say to make her feel better. "Thank you, David. I'm really grateful for everything we have." David gently kissed her forehead. "I'm the lucky one, Sarah. You're the strongest woman I've ever met." They broke apart from the hug, and Sarah went back to focusing on the accounts, but now with a sense of peace. David was right. The past was a part of her, but it didn't define who she was now. She had built a new life, full of love and success, and that's what mattered. However, at night, when everything was quiet and the children were asleep, Sarah sometimes looked at the ceiling, her thoughts returning to Mark. Where would he be now? Did he think of her? Did he feel any remorse? But these were questions she knew would probably never be answered, and somehow, that was okay with her. Because in the end, she had found her own happiness, and that was what truly mattered. Sarah was exhausted. In addition to managing the restaurant, which had become one of the busiest in the region, she also took care of her twin children, now almost 6 years old. Despite David's help, who managed the other restaurant location, the responsibilities were overwhelming. Sarah knew she needed extra help with the house and the children. "David, I think we need to hire a nanny and a housekeeper," she said one night as they sat at the kitchen table. "I barely have time to rest, and you're always busy with the restaurant too." David readily agreed, giving her an understanding smile. "I was thinking the same thing, Sarah. We should have done this a long time ago. Let's find someone trustworthy." After a few interviews, Sarah hired 2 women, the nanny who would care for the twins during the day, and a housekeeper named Lisa. Lisa was 30 years old, very friendly, and did her job impeccably. From the beginning, Sarah noticed that Lisa was different. She was attentive and dedicated, and Sarah enjoyed talking with her while she worked. Sarah always made sure to treat her employees with respect and consideration, creating a friendly and welcoming environment. One day, while Lisa was cleaning the living room, Sarah was sitting on the couch, analyzing the restaurant's financial statements. The finances were good, but it was always necessary to closely monitor expenses and profits. She took the opportunity to strike up a conversation with Lisa, curious to know more about her life. "Lisa, do you have children?" Sarah asked, looking up from her papers. Lisa paused for a moment and smiled, continuing to wipe the table. Yes, Mrs. Sarah, 2 children, just like you. A boy and a girl. They are my joy. Sarah smiled, empathizing even more with Lisa. Oh, what a coincidence. Mine are also a boy and a girl, and they're almost 6 now. It's not easy taking care of 2, is it? Lisa chuckled softly. It certainly isn't. Especially because my husband and I were unemployed for a while. We went through a lot of difficulties, you know? But now with this job, I can help at home, and my children no longer go without. Sarah nodded, feeling a pang of empathy. I'm glad this job is helping, Lisa. And I thank you for being here. You're great at what you do. I'm lucky to have found someone so dedicated. Lisa smiled, clearly touched by Sarah's words. Thank you, Mrs. Sarah. It means a lot to hear that. Months passed, and Sarah's closeness to Lisa and the other employees grew each day. She liked to maintain a relationship of friendship and trust with everyone who worked for her. With the twins' 6th birthday approaching, Sarah began planning a big party. She wanted something special for her children, an event they would remember for many years. David, I was thinking, Sarah said as they prepared dinner. I want to throw a big party for the boys. Rent a buffet with a good space, invite a lot of people, especially those with children for the twins to play with. David nodded in approval. I think that's a great idea, love. It'll be fun for the boys, and they'll love having their friends around. Excited, Sarah began making the guest list. She wanted to include relatives, close friends, and of course, her employees. She decided to invite Lisa personally, knowing it would be a good opportunity for Lisa and her children to have some fun. At the end of the workday, Sarah found Lisa in the living room, cleaning the furniture. She approached with a warm smile. Lisa, I'd like to invite you to my children's birthday party next weekend, Sarah said. You can bring your children and whoever else you want. It's going to be a big party, with cake, snacks, everything all you can eat. Lisa, surprised and visibly moved, stopped what she was doing and looked at Sarah seriously. Mrs. Sarah. Wow, I'd be very happy to go. My children would love it. Of course, Sarah replied enthusiastically. It's going to be a party for the kids to have fun. The more, the merrier. Lisa smiled, clearly touched by the invitation. Thank you so much, Mrs. Sarah. I'll definitely be there with my children. They'll love it. Over time, the party preparations took shape. Sarah hired a buffet with a great space to host all the children and their parents. The place was decorated with colorful balloons and had a play area that would certainly be the highlight for the little ones. On the day of the party, the place was full of laughter and joy. Children ran from one side to the other, playing on the slides and bouncy castles set up especially for the event. Adults gathered in small groups, chatting and enjoying the snacks and sweets. Lisa arrived with her children, and Sarah greeted them warmly. So glad you came, and these must be your children, she said, bending down to greet the kids. Yes, this is Sophia and this is Lucas, Lisa replied proudly. They were very excited to come. Sarah knelt down to the children's height and smiled. Sophia and Lucas looked at her shyly, but soon joined the others, drawn by the excitement around them. I really appreciate the invitation, Mrs. Sarah. It's a joy for them to be here, Lisa said. I'm glad you came, Sarah replied sincerely. You're part of our family here, and it's great to see the little ones having so much fun. As the party continued, Sarah watched her children playing and felt a wave of happiness. The past still haunted her occasionally, but moments like this reminded her how much she had achieved, how much her life had changed for the better. She looked at David across the room, talking to some friends, and smiled. He noticed and returned the smile, raising his glass in a silent toast to her. A few minutes later, Lisa approached Sarah with a smile on her face, holding the hand of a man who had just arrived. Mrs. Sarah, I'd like to introduce my husband. He just arrived, Lisa said excitedly. This is Mark. When the man next to Lisa looked up to greet her, Sarah's blood ran cold. Her face turned pale as paper. It was him. Mark, her ex-husband, the man who had abandoned her when she needed him most, fleeing with her money and leaving her on the brink of death. Mark looked as shocked as Sarah. His eyes widened, and he froze, his hand still extended in the air, unable to hide his surprise. "What?" Mark began, but Sarah didn't let him finish. In a swift motion, she grabbed the glass of soda in her hand and threw the entire contents in his face. Lisa gasped, stepping back, not understanding what was happening. "Swindler!" Sarah shouted, trembling with rage. "Now you're going to pay for everything you did, Mark." Mark raised his hands, trying to protect himself from the sudden attack, his face wet and an expression of shock plastered on it. "Sarah, please calm down," Lisa tried to appease, her voice tense. Lisa, perplexed, looked from Sarah to Mark, not knowing what to do. She had never seen her boss like this. "What's happening, Mrs. Sarah?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling with fear and confusion. Sarah turned to Lisa, her eyes still burning with fury. "You're fired, Lisa," she shouted, not caring who heard. "Take your children and get out of here." Lisa began to cry, tears streaming down her face as she tried to understand what was happening. But I didn't do anything," she stammered desperately. Sarah, with no patience for explanations, waved to the event's security guards. "Expel this woman and her children, and get this man out of here too," she ordered, pointing at Mark. Mark, seeing that the situation was quickly escalating, tried to argue. "Sarah, please, let's talk." But before he could continue, David, who was talking with other guests across the hall, saw the commotion and came running. "What's going on here?" David asked, looking from Sarah to Mark and then to Lisa. Sarah pointed at Mark, her voice full of anger and pain. "This is Mark, my ex-husband, the man who abandoned me and stole all my money." David put a hand on Sarah's shoulder, trying to calm her. "Sarah, please calm down. Let's resolve this another way." "No," Sarah shouted, interrupting. "I know where you live now, Mark, and you're going to pay for everything you did to me." Mark, realizing the situation was getting out of control, looked at Sarah with a mixture of fear and regret. "You're a liar, Mark," Sarah shouted, interrupting again. "You've always been a liar." The commotion drew the attention of the guests, who began to whisper among themselves, forming a circle around the scene. David, realizing the situation was getting out of hand, looked at the security guards. "Please escort both of them out," he said calmly but firmly. The security guards moved quickly, taking Mark and Lisa by the arms and beginning to lead them toward the exit. Lisa continued to cry while Mark kept his gaze fixed on Sarah, his face a mixture of fear and regret. "Sarah, please," he tried again, but was cut off by the door closing behind him. Sarah, still trembling with anger, looked around and saw the confused faces of the guests. She took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure. "Let's speed up the happy birthday," she said to David. "I want this party to end soon." David nodded, still concerned about Sarah's emotional state, but obeyed. He gathered the guests, and a few minutes later, they sang "Happy Birthday" to the twins, who, despite the confusion, were excited and happy. However, Sarah could barely focus on her children's joy. Her mind was full of plans for revenge. When the party finally ended, Sarah quickly said goodbye to the guests, thanking them mechanically for their presence. As soon as the last guest left, she returned home with David and the children. Back home, Sarah went straight to the bedroom, closed the door, and threw herself on the bed, beginning to cry with rage and frustration. David came in right after her, sitting beside her. "Sarah, I know this is difficult," he began, his voice soft. "But we need to think calmly." "Calmly?" she retorted, raising her head and staring at him, her eyes red from crying. "You don't understand, David. He destroyed my life, and now he shows up here as if nothing happened." David sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I understand, love, I really do. But anger won't get you anywhere. We need to think about how to act wisely." Wisely. Sarah stood up, interrupting. There's nothing sensible about this, David. I'm going to make him pay for everything. David saw that he couldn't calm her down. He had never seen Sarah like this before, consumed by rage. He knew he needed to be patient, but he was also worried about what she might do. I just want you to know that I'm here to support you, Sarah. Whatever you decide, I'm by your side. Sarah looked at David, still trembling with anger but with a shadow of gratitude in her eyes. Thank you, David, she said, taking a deep breath. But now I need to think of a plan. He won't escape this time. I'm going to make him pay, whatever it takes. David nodded, worried but respecting her space. He left the room, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, her mind working furiously, formulating what she would do next. The image of a frightened and vulnerable Mark repeatedly appeared in her mind, fueling her determination to take revenge. She didn't know exactly how, but one thing was certain: Mark would not go unpunished. Determined to get revenge on Mark, Sarah wasted no time. Knowing Lisa's address, she hired a private detective to follow Mark and find out more about his new life. In a short time, the detective brought detailed information about where Mark worked, who his new friends were, and even the places he frequented. Sarah used this information to devise her plan of revenge. First, she sent letters to Mark's superiors, revealing his criminal past. Not content with just sending letters, Sarah personally went to Mark's workplace, spoke with his superiors, and presented evidence of the criminal proceedings he was facing. Mark's superiors, concerned about the company's reputation, did not hesitate to fire him. But that wasn't enough for Sarah. She wanted more. Determined to ruin Mark's life, Sarah contacted the owner of the house where Mark lived with Lisa and their children. She made a generous cash offer to buy the house, an amount the owner couldn't refuse. As soon as the transaction was finalized, Mark and his family were evicted, with nowhere to go. Sarah felt satisfied for a brief moment, believing she was finally getting the revenge she desired. However, David, observing his wife's actions, was deeply concerned. He knew Sarah's rage was getting out of control. "Sarah, we need to talk," David said one night, with a serious tone. "I don't recognize you anymore. You're blinded by rage. Buying their house. That was crazy." Sarah scoffed, crossing her arms defensively. "David, I was able to buy the house. Now I'm rich, I can do whatever I want with my money." David sighed deeply, visibly disappointed. "Being rich doesn't make you better, Sarah. You're losing yourself. And what you did to Lisa and the children. They're not to blame for what Mark did. You're making innocent people suffer because of your revenge." David's words hit Sarah like a blow. She remained silent, thinking about what he had said. Deep down, she knew he was right about Lisa. She felt bitter regret about how she acted towards her on the day of the party. However, when it came to Mark, she felt no remorse at all. I promise I'll try to change," Sarah said finally, her voice a little hesitant. "I know I might have exaggerated with Lisa, but with Mark, I can't let this go." David nodded, though there was still concern in his gaze. "I hope so, Sarah. I hope you don't lose yourself on this path." Determined to repair some of the damage she had caused, Sarah wanted to visit Lisa to apologize, but she had no idea where Lisa was now. It was then that she thought of the detective. He might have tracked Lisa's whereabouts as well. With the address in hand, Sarah drove to the new place where Lisa and her children were living. It was a complex of simple studio apartments, and the precarious state of the place was evident. The walls were peeling, and the smell of mold hung in the air. As she knocked on the door, Sarah felt a knot in her throat. When Lisa opened the door and saw Sarah standing there, her face hardened immediately. "What do you want?" Lisa asked, her voice laden with distrust and anger. Sarah swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her regret. "Lisa, I came to apologize. I know what I did was terrible and unfair. I wasn't thinking clearly." Lisa tried to close the door in Sarah's face, but she put her foot in the door, insisting, Please, let me explain. Before Lisa could respond, one of her children appeared at the door. He was pale, visibly thin, and his eyes were tired. Sarah felt a pang in her heart. She knew she had contributed to that situation. Guilt was like a heavy stone on her chest. He's sick, Lisa said, her voice softer now, but still with a hint of pain. Ever since we were evicted, things have only gotten worse. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to control her emotions. Lisa, I didn't know Mark was with you when I saw him. I lost control. I acted out of anger, but now I see that I didn't think about the consequences for you and your children. Mark abandoned me when I was on the verge of death, and when I saw him there. Sarah stopped, tears beginning to stream down her face. I just want to help now, truly. Lisa looked at her, suspicious but also too exhausted to argue. Help? How do you intend to do that? She asked, crossing her arms. Sarah wiped her tears and took a deep breath. I got you a job, a place that pays well and offers childcare for the children. And I'll pay for their health care. I want to do what I can to make amends for what I did. Lisa remained silent for a long moment, clearly battling her emotions. Finally, she nodded, the expression on her face softening slightly. If you really want to help, Sarah, I accept. Not for myself, but for my children. They don't deserve to suffer any more than they already are. Sarah felt a sudden relief mixed with persistent guilt. I promise, Lisa. I'll do what I can to help you all. Lisa gave a slight nod, still maintaining an air of caution. Sarah saw a spark of hope in her eyes, turned her back, and began to walk away. As she walked back to the car, her mind returned to Mark. Although she had begun to repair the damage caused to Lisa, she still didn't know what to do about him. Days passed, and Sarah tried to put the past behind her. The anger she felt towards Mark was still intense, but she knew she needed to move forward. David was her safe harbor, who supported her in her worst moments, and her children were her joy and hope. She didn't want her marriage to be harmed by bitter feelings that belonged to the past. She strived to focus on the present, on the happiness she had built with her new family. Months passed, and Lisa and her children began to flourish again. With the new job and Sarah's financial help, their lives were finally getting back on track. Slowly, Sarah was able to forget about Mark. She dedicated herself to the restaurant, to her marriage, and to her children, filling her days with love and work. However, the past always finds a way to resurface. One day, Sarah received an unexpected call from her lawyer. His voice was serious, and he went straight to the point. Sarah, I need to inform you that Mark has been arrested, but not for what he did to you. Sarah felt her heart race, a mixture of confused emotions swirling through her mind. Arrested? What do you mean? She asked, gripping the phone tightly. He was caught trying to steal. During the approach, the police checked his criminal record and found the case regarding the money he took from you. Now he's going to pay for that too. Sarah was silent for a moment, processing the information. Part of her felt relief, a sense of justice finally being served, but another part wanted to close this chapter once and for all. She decided she needed to see Mark personally. The next day, Sarah went to the prison. When she entered the visiting room, she found Mark on the other side of the glass, sitting with his head down. When he saw her, he looked up, and Sarah noticed the defeated expression on his face. So you finally managed to destroy my life, he said, his voice low and bitter. Sarah's eyes were firm and determined. I didn't destroy your life, Mark. You did that yourself. I heard you tried to take Lisa's money. You truly have no limits, do you? Mark sighed deeply, his gaze returning to the floor. I had nothing, Sarah. No money, no job. I tried to take Lisa's money, but she was smarter than me. She reported it and got the money back. Sarah shook her head in disbelief. That money was mine. I gave it to her to take care of her children. Her children, and you, with no love even for them, tried to take what was for their good. Mark lowered his head even further, his face showing shame. I know. I've done a lot of wrong things. To you, to Lisa, to everyone. I don't know who I am anymore. Sarah felt a mixture of contempt and sadness. She knew it was too late for him, but still, hearing his words brought her a strange feeling. You'll serve your sentence, Mark. Unfortunately, you won't be in prison for long, only 2 years. But at least for a while, you'll pay for what you did. Mark began to cry, tears silently streaming down his face. I'm glad you recovered from your illness, he said, still with his head down. I wasn't able to help you when you needed it most. I failed as a man, as a husband, as a human being. Sarah kept her gaze firm. Not thanks to you, and I don't believe your words. I don't know if you're truly remorseful or just lamenting your current situation. Mark was tried and sentenced to 2 years in prison. During his time in prison, he saw several psychologists and was diagnosed with psychopathy. The doctors explained that he possessed no real emotions and viewed the people around him as objects, tools to achieve his own goals. This explained so much of what he had done, both to her and to Lisa. As Mark began his sentence, Sarah finally felt a peace she hadn't felt in a long time. She looked at David, who was always by her side, and at her children, who were playing happily in the backyard. She felt a wave of boundless gratitude. She knew that despite all the suffering she had endured, she was now exactly where she was meant to be. Her life was finally at peace. She could move forward with the certainty that she had done what she could to correct the wrongs and protect those she loved. And above all, she knew she was happy and fulfilled, surrounded by her family and the love they shared. David approached, hugging her from behind. Is everything okay, love? He asked softly. Sarah smiled, feeling the warmth and security of his arms around her. Yes, David. Now, finally, everything is okay. She knew the path to peace had been long and full of obstacles, but she was willing to move forward, leaving the past where it deserved to be, behind her. Mark might have been a shadow in her life, but she wouldn't allow him to be more than that. Looking to the future, Sarah knew she was on the right path.